But there's also the memorandum of understanding with Pixel that it's not technically not legally binding, but they've said that they will do mitigation needed, they will do demolitions that are needed on the site.
Yeah. I think the devil's in the details on all of that. I think both on our side and in determining, defining, and addressing proper mitigation of risk would be something that would be one thing to consider locally before we would bind ourselves into something like that. But I'll go back to my point before that we do want to have a say and a role in crafting our own destiny here for our community. And so I hope that we're all things worst case scenario is that we retain some influence over what happens to that site, so that we're not left and our residents aren't left with that kind of hanging over our neck as something that we can't do anything with. That being said, HIG and Pixel have I'll place the blame really on HIG. There's been multiple occasions where they've made public statements or made good faith statements by a representative that later those statements did not come to fruition, and so I remain very skeptical of a lot of that. I think healthy skepticism. I'm angry about it. There's no sense in being angry about it. This is a situation where we don't have all of the information that we need. We won't have that information until a point comes in which either HIG shares it with us or they're compelled or there's some opportunity for that. So the MOU, funny enough, we did have a meeting at a high level, discussed that stakeholder group, but then within a matter of days prior to me even seeing that draft MOU, it was public on Twitter and then covered by Columbus Media. So, right now the current situation is we're going to keep doing our job, setting priorities, supporting economic growth. The paper mill is number one priority in all of that. But like I said, right now it's in the hands of a private owner, and that private owner has 100% discretion on who they decide to sell that property to.
So again, the paper mill, the Pixel response team had been in executive session for a while.
Right.
So I know you guys want to speak freely without news media getting it out, letting it out, and
well, and it's not so much, and it's not. We've tried. I'll speak for the Board of Commissioners, and actually all of our other stakeholders have been doing as much as we can to communicate and to provide transparency. Ohio law provides for the ability to go into executive session under certain limitations. And there's good reason for that, because when you start talking about pending sales of property or speculative economic development negotiations and things like that,
all the sunshine law.
The things that are not ready for public consumption, and actually public consumption can pose a risk to those negotiations moving forward. A great example is if you start talking about a property that someone wants to buy and there's interest in that property, it's not that hard to believe that the price of that building or that site could inflate if you start talking about it. So we've had to keep those conversations in executive session, but we have done our best to provide statements and updates as we're able to. And the other thing is, there's been times in this where you hear a public statement and you want to make your own public statement in response to that public statement, but what we've learned, that's not a dog you want to get bit by too many times. And when you're dealing with a company that makes a public statement that says one thing and then they renege on that weeks later, it makes it more difficult for us to accurately communicate the information we have, because there's not always confidence that the folks on the other side providing that information, are providing a whole lot of solidified assurance that that information is going to remain accurate. And so,
and Senator Bernie Moreno was very critical of HIG after the April 15th announcement, which got the response that, oh, we'll leave it open till the end of the year, which then that changed.
Right, and that's probably the prime example. But the MOU is another example of that, where hey, here, we'll give it to you for $1, and then, oh, by the way, we're going to sell it, to whoever we want. So, that is just the type of information that sometimes gets, whether it gets lost because of levels of separation. I don't really think that that's the case. I think where we are, and I won't speak on behalf of everyone here, but I'll speak where I think we are, is we're in a situation where we need to learn what HIG actually decides to do with this site, because we're preparing scenarios for a lot of different scenarios, but we have no seat at the table. We have no influence over what they actually decide to do. We just don't have that leverage. It's a private entity that owns it, and they'll make a private sale. And judging by what HIG has done in the past, what their pattern has been, they're a private equity firm. They exist to grow their portfolio, or at least mitigate losses to their portfolio of investors. That's not what's best for us. That's not, that's, and I think there's elements of what they've done that I don't have any qualms or any problem about saying are absolutely shameful. But I can be angry, I can pound my fists on the desk, and we've done plenty of that. But right now we're in a situation where we're actively engaged in this on a weekly basis. But at this point in time, the site is still controlled by HIG. And so, like I said, there's potential for I think it's okay to generally say there's interest in the site by other manufacturers, but we don't have an insight as to how serious what their actual proposals to HIG are, and what other proposals HIG has on the table. So,
well, the usual criticism is that they just want profit. If they will kill it and get what they can out of it, if they manage it well and get what they can out of it, they just want the profit.
Right.
So,
well, and I think going back to where we started the conversation around base economic development, to promote base economic development, and the value of promoting and supporting base economic development is when you're doing that continually, you're now providing, hopefully you're attracting investment that withstands generations, that the reason that investment is being made now is because it's a modern process that has a modern market demand. And that's been, I'm sure as you've covered the history of the paper mill, over the course of the last decade or so, there's not been investment made by its owners into the site. It's just, they haven't invested in the people in the same way that they've done in the past. They haven't invested in their machinery and their equipment, and so.
But is that like the buggy whip manufacturers watching Henry Ford build his Model Ts?
I think that there's some of that, but there's also profitable paper manufacturers around the country, and I think what is attractive about this site is the same thing that's always been attractive to this site for paper manufacturing or any manufacturing. I think that there will be always a demand for paper. And there are market segments within the overall paper industry that have that are a larger market share and a larger where there's a larger demand. I mean, you can just think of that in your day-to-day life, or the day-to-day life of most people. I know for me, there's probably a cardboard box on my front porch nearly every single day. So there's opportunities, for paper. There's opportunities in a lot of different market sectors. So.
Well, it sounds like the sweeping crew is coming up the hallway.
Yeah.
My battery's running down, and you have a ball game to get to. So
Yeah.
in closing, can you say what we might see in the next few months to few years with the paper mill?
I can't say that for sure. Every time I've tried to pull out a crystal ball, it's not been very accurate. This is a very difficult thing for any community to wrestle with. I look at some of the things that we've done that have been positive. I think we've had a great response in providing support for the workers. We've had great collaboration. I think that collaboration will continue. At some point, there's going to be decisions that are made by HIG. There's going to be decisions that have to be made around our response and our approach to those things locally. But there's too many scenarios really for me to speculate on what that could look like. What I would say, the reason I ran for county commissioner and why I, love this job is, one, because I love my community, but my experience has been in economic development. I still work in economic development outside of my role here, and most communities, sometimes it takes a long time before you start to taste the fruits of your labor. But now's the time, to get really, really serious about focusing our efforts on economic growth. I think we're headed in the right direction, and I think that this site is a perfect example of why we need to rally around that. Because, like I said, the impacts are very real when you lose incumbent manufacturers, but the impacts are very real when you attract new employers as well. We've had a very rich history in manufacturing, a rich heritage, and a great incumbent workforce that has worked in manufacturing, and I think manufacturing definitely has a place in our community, and so that's where my focus will continue to be through this year and beyond, is focusing on Ross County's economy and opportunities for growth, reasonable, measured growth. That doesn't mean putting, factories out in the middle of a farm field, near Clarksburg. That's not necessarily the best fit, but we have to have a measured approach in the way that we do these, but we have to be aggressive as well. And so that's why I've been adamant about my positions in economic development, and I'm really proud of our team and the work that they're doing to engage on paper mill, but then all active projects and preparing for future projects here in the community.
All right. Well, I barely have enough power to finish this, so I'll say David Glass, Ross County Commissioner, thank you very much.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Thanks.